the last session for today, session 88, we are delighted to introduce Namita Gokhale, A Life in Books. This session is presented by a media partner, Dainik Bhaskar. Writer, publisher, and festival director, Namita Gokhale's life has been woven around books, her own and those written by others. From young romance in her early novel, Paro, Dreams of Passion, to the latest, The Blind Matriarch, set in COVID times, the trajectory of her work touches an astonishing range. In addition, her innovative concepts seeded the Jaipur Literature Festival and many other forums which center-staged books as a cultural priority. Where does Gokhale's energy and vision come from? Things to Leave Behind, which won her the Sahitya Akademi Award, suggests a personal allegiance to Kumaon, but that too is only one among many literary journeys. In conversation with journalist Mandira Nayar, Gokhale speaks of a vibrant creativity and advocacy for Indian literature. Our first speaker for today, Namita Gokhale, is the author of 21 books and Sahitya Akademi awardee for 2021. She is the co-founder and co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. Her acclaimed debut novel, Paro, Dreams of Passion, was published in 1984. An edited anthology, Mystics and Skeptics, Searching Himalayan Masters, will be published in January 2023. Her recent work of fiction include The Blind Matriarch, Betrayed by Hope, and Jaipur Journals. Gokhale has written extensively on myth and religion. She was awarded the First Centenary National Award for Literature by the Assam Sahitya Sabha in 2017 and has received recognition both for her writing and her commitment to multilingual Indian literature and cross-cultural literary dialogue. Welcome. Our second speaker, Mandira Nayar, is a journalist with 2 decades of reporting experience. She writes on books, foreign affairs, and cultures, and is currently the Deputy Bureau Chief at The Week. A Charles Wallace scholar, Nayar has previously worked with The Hindu and The Telegraph. Ladies and gentlemen, Namita Gokhale, A Life in Books.
Good evening. I'm very excited to be part of this session, and I think we've all had a really long day. But I think, and at this point of time, it's sunset, I would like to start talking to Namita really about the sunrise of when she started writing as a writer. She came on with Paro, and you've heard about it. And Paro came out in 1984, as you've heard, and it came out in a year where, it was a blood-soaked year. It was a year of assassination. It was a year where I think Sharabi was the film. The vocabulary was, it was a different time and a different space. And here came Paro with this great energy, this very contemporary book, incredibly sort of, it was racy. It was far ahead of its time. It was bound to shock, and it sort of did shock. So I wanted to ask Namita about writing Paro and its reception in 1984, a world away.
It sounds so long ago. I was all of 26 when I wrote that book, and 28 when it published. And it's difficult to imagine today the waves of shock that it caused. I was worried, first of all, about my mother-in-law.
Really?
So, I don't know how she'd react to it. Yeah. It was a liberal Marathi family. They liked books. So I dedicated the book to her. And I said, to Ai. Yeah. So that got her on my side. Yeah. And then the book came out. I got so much unexpected flack. Today's young writers cannot imagine what it's like to be confronted by people who think you've committed something like a crime, or that you always were a criminal with a criminal mind. What is a good middle-class girl, or somebody who we thought was a good middle-class girl, doing with this book? And I never thought it was shocking in any way. When I was writing it, my father found a copy of the manuscript.
Yeah.
And he said, "Child, what are you writing?" I said, "I'm writing a novel."
Yeah.
He said, "Child, I think it would be best if you were discreet."
And you, of course, weren't.
And
right?
of course, I couldn't tell him that if there was anything this book was not, it was not discreet.
Yeah.
But I, as a young girl, didn't realize the waves and waves and waves of shock it would cause. And almost 40 years later, people read it. Any of you who want a good laugh, go to Full Circle, get a copy. It's been in print for 40 years. This one, Paro, my firstborn, and it keeps people smiling still. So that's wonderful.
So, I just want you to read a little bit so that you could kind of tell this thing. But it was more than just, I think it was not only the fact that it sort of was page 3 life now as you see it. It was about scandals, it was about affairs, it was about, about lust and love, right? And I think it was, if you look at it right now, I don't know whether anybody would get the shock value, but then you're right, it would have been completely sort of out of the blue. So could you just sort of read us a bit?
I think I'll read out a little bit of the author's note instead. This was an edition that came out later, and it says, "I was 26 when I wrote Paro. I'd been thrown out of college. Super, the highly successful film magazine that I had founded was shut down. I was married and had 2 young daughters. My mother-in-law, a lady with literary taste, wasn't expecting me to write quite such a novel." So it was like that. And it begins with this glamorous woman called Paro, and the girl called Priya, who works in her husband's office. And I'll just read out the first paragraph or 2. It says, "I am writing about them because I saw myself in her.
Yeah.
I was BR is the anti-hero. I was BR's secretary at that time. All of us in the office thought he was a real dreamboat. He looked straight into our eyes. He knew all our first names. He was a compulsive nymphomaniac. The dictionary says that a male nymphomaniac is properly described as a victim of satyriasis. I think he was a nymphomaniac, and I think it was related to his compulsive need to sell himself. He was short, but he hadn't begun to go bald. And he was our boss. Ivy, Mary, and I loved him madly, and all of us hated Paro. She would breeze into the office every now and then and appraise us through narrowed, green-gray eyes. Her eyes mocked us, and they mocked our devotion to BR. So I think what shocked people was that I was slightly making fun of or laughing at a man who considered himself very successful, and most of middle-class India considered very successful, that type of person. So it just jarred.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago. I've written 21 books since then. So I think we can move on.
But I think, I think that between the 21, and I wanted to read, you start off with, and I think The Blind Matriarch, you say, is your last novel for the moment. And, I just wanted to cover the arc, really, in some ways. The Blind Matriarch, written during COVID, at a point of time where loss is very much central to the book. You say, if Paro is full of these liaisons, The Blind Matriarch, in some ways, is about a woman dying, really, they say. So can you really talk about, the arc of that, of your journey from Paro, and after which you said that the shock waves, it took you a very, very long time to get published again?
Paro was a success because it was a type of novel. After that, Shobha De took the same style and began writing in exactly the same style with her Starry Nights, but she wasn't quite that sarcastic was, and she made a very successful career out of it because she stuck to that formula for a long time. People, after they called me a pornographist and they called me this and that, I got very tired of it, and I wrote a very serious book. Nobody wanted to publish that very serious book until much later. I mean, it was a sad, depressing book. It was called A Himalayan Love Story.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to crawl back from, if your first book is a huge success and suddenly you're internationally known, and then suddenly the world forgets you, and you're no longer making any point or any impression, it can be a bit depressing, but it's very good for the writing, because you reassess, you think what you really want to do. It worked for me, that long period of failure. I just saw an old issue of Savvy, something, and had me on the cover, and it's a Namita Gokhale on failure. So even at the height of Paro's success, that failure was always with me, and I deeply empathize with all those writers who are struggling with their books, because I know very, very well what that struggle is all about.
And doesn't it, in some ways, I mean, as writers in any case, as you always are vulnerable, right? And it is one of the toughest things to do. And fail, you're sort of, especially if you're a woman, you're sort of struggling with failure much more.
Absolutely. I remember after a long time, Paro, nobody wanted to publish me much after that because they wanted a repeat of Paro. Then I wrote a Himalayan love story, and I remember whether it was the Pioneer or the Tribune, I don't know which paper it was, but one of them, for some reason, had an article in the first page which said, a promiscuous book by a promiscuous woman.
No.
That was a bit, and the guy, whoever done the review, I know it was a guy because I knew who did it.
Because of course, yes.
No, I know who did it.
Okay.
But he didn't sign his name off. And it was a bit much promiscuous woman. I mean, I took it, I was a bit upset, but not very upset. But now at 66, at 26, I was a little bit vulnerable. At 66, I'm invulnerable. And I'm invulnerable not because I have such a great experience of my sort of thing about myself. I'm invulnerable because I don't care. I've written a book. I care about whether I'm happy with what I've written or not. If I'm happy with what I've written, lovely. Then nobody can hurt me. If 2 or 3 people have read it and appreciated it, that's quite enough for me. If it's a success, it's a bonus. But it doesn't. But I know that there are writers, and because they've invested so much in their books, they're vulnerable, that even if there's a full review which is beautiful, those few lines of criticism, they rankle. But if you're a writer, that you just got to be used to it.
You have to develop a thick skin.
Absolutely.
So, talking really about Blind Matriarch. And I remember when we were talking about it, you said, I wrote this book and I thought it was going to be so boring. I didn't know why anybody would want to read about this old woman dying. But can you talk about Matamai?
So, I wrote a novel which I think all my books, slowly as I grow older, the subject goes to aging somewhere in it. I wrote a novel called The Jaipur Journals, which had a wicked old woman at the heart of it, a thwarted writer called Rudrani Rana. And that was my beginning of encounter of older women, and which translated my own experience. And then I was sitting here in the festival and I wanted to run away because I wanted to write a novel called The Blind Matriarch. That's all I knew. That there was a novel called The Blind Matriarch. It was about an old woman who lived on the top floor of a house. That's all I knew. And I remember 1919, the festival got over. No, it was 1920 perhaps. The festival got over and I had to go to Nepal for something. I just ran there, didn't even unpack, just took whatever I could find, attended that day conference and checked into the room, which I found a quiet room in the corner of the hotel looking out into a quiet garden, and I began writing The Blind Matriarch. So I started writing it before COVID.
Much before.
I still remember 9th of February 2020, the COVID started.
And do you have vivid memories of it? I mean, do you remember vividly dates that you start all your novels?
This one I remember, not otherwise. This one I remember, and then, because I was in Kathmandu at that time, the COVID had just begun. Like I was on the flight back and there were Chinese women in it, and I was wondering, hotel was full of Chinese people, and I would wonder because,
of course, at that point of the height.
It wasn't still the same panic. And then after that, I went to, sorry, I got distracted by people walking through. But I began writing this book, and it just got on a life of its own, and I finished it within, I think, about 6 months. I'd write all the time. I've never had that luxury of so much time to write as I had during COVID. And I wrote it in real time.
Yeah.
And I can see my editor sitting there, Manasi Subramaniam. She was also locked up in COVID.
Yes, I know. Really close to your house, almost like right there.
So what would happen was, every time I wrote 2-3 chapters, I would send it to her. And because she had the time, she would read it and edit it.
Yeah.
And we got through it. So before we knew it, the book was completed. And I don't think it needed too many edits. And it was in real time.
Yeah.
Whatever happened in the last week went into my novel as happening to the characters. They had their own lives as well. And then when I said, when are you going to publish it? She said, we are not going to publish it at least for 1.5 years, because the publishing industry had also shut down. So when it opened, I said, who will read this novel? It sounded so boring when I came out with it again. But what to do? It came out, it did well, and it's now one of my favorite books.
It really is. It's one of those books that I think that really stays with you. It's a book where the character sort of is... I don't know, personally, you sort of, it's a loss of your, this thing, it's more than just her passing. It's, you know, we've talked about this, it's a passing of an era, it's passing of a generation, really. And, you know, at this heart of your books really are these people like her, all the women, for example, who is this very resilient woman who keeps together families. And the theme of your books is women who are resilient, Indian women who sort of are ordinary, who live ordinary lives, but yet have extraordinary reserves of strength. And can you really talk about that, this canvas of women that you really have, of the ones who keep family, the ones who sort of this thing, and where you draw your inspiration from?
I think Indian women are socially very, very vulnerable. But individually, and I can't say for the whole world because I haven't seen women everywhere, but Indian women are the strongest I know of so many I've encountered. And Pahari women, I'm a Kumaoni, and Pahari women are women from all our mountains, whether it is Bhutan or whether it is Darjeeling, they have an extra resilience. That's because they've grown up in a very difficult
environment.
Yes. The weather is bad, the conditions are bad. I mean, there are wild animals around, there's no water, and they are tough. And I respect toughness. Whereas in more privileged bits of societies, वो नज़ाकत लोगों की, उनकी खूबसूरत आपके पैर ज़मीन में न पड़े, that हमारे पैर ज़मीन में ही रहे हैं.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm not too impressed by beauty and romance and glamour and luxury. I like tough women, and I end up writing about them quite a lot. And I like tough women who love life.
Yeah.
That's what matters to me.
And who've also seen life.
And who've seen life and who enjoy it. I don't want sad women who are strong.
True.
I want women who take on their lives and enjoy every bit of it. And when people clapped in this line, clearly, it hit people's hearts, because all of us know those women who have that strength.
Yes.
And throughout this literature festival, I'm always very cognizant of having at least one woman on every panel. I resist panels because women have, you have 4 men talking. I'm sorry to say they'll talk, sorry to the gentlemen in the audience, but they will try very hard to sound very intelligent.
Yes.
And they'll talk through their hats. Whereas the one woman in the audience,
she'll know.
She will come down to the brass tacks.
Yeah.
This is not, I'm not being gender prejudiced. I respect men. I'm not a feminist in that sense of the word.
Yeah.
But there's a special way women think, and that's because they've grown up in the material world. They have to handle the small problems all the time.
True.
When you've grown up handling the small problems, till you're old, you're handling the small problems. Gas nahi aayi, ye nahi hua, wo nahi hua.
You're multitasking.
You're rooted in a different way than if you can just tell your missus. Ki, oh, pata nahi kya hua, zara, or you can tell your PA, or you can tell somebody. So I think that grounding that women have anywhere in the world is valuable, and when men have it, it's valuable for them also. This is not a gender thing.
No.
It's an experience thing.
And, in some ways, you talk about this grounding and you talk about, women who've, lived life in the sense that they deal with other aspects of it. But there is a certain aspect of all the women that you write about that manage to take life and their experience. It's about making mountains out of, not making mountains out of molehills. And you say that it is an aspect of that. And I wanted to ask you about, in some ways it also reflects, and Madam Mai, it also reflects inner strength of your own life. You've dealt with the adversities that have been handed over to you with great strength. And can you talk about being thrown out of college? That's an interesting
thing. For those in the audience who haven't been through my bio notes or don't know all my sad story of my life, it's as though life has given me one kick after another, and every time I've just got up and dusted the dirt, muck and hurt and pain off. But I was married when I was young, very young. I got married when I was 18.
18, yeah.
And very soon afterwards, I had some difficulties in my marriage, though I was very, very devoted to my husband. But we had a lot of problems. And then after that, I got cancer when I was very young. And those were days when cancer was still much more dreaded than it is now. And people would come to me and say, "Arey, cancer ho gaya. Arey, hamare dadaji ko cancer hua tha, aur 2 din mein bas khatam." So I just forbade people. I said, nobody's going to come here and talk to me about cancer. I don't want to talk about it. One doctor also told me, your time is very short and all. I said, "Mare mere dushman." And I went to a nicer, more pleasant doctor who was kinder to me, and God blessed me. I'm still around, I don't know how many years later. And but I lost my husband when I was very young after that. Then I got 2 or 3 serious illnesses after that. Then I faced other challenges in my family. So who hasn't? All of you, I'm sure, have faced all these challenges. But for me, what was saying was that they all got crunched up together.
Together, yes.
That's all.
By the time you were 42, you dealt with all this.
And afterwards also, and then had good patches. So I don't think I've been any more fortunate, unfortunate. All of us go through patches of very good, very bad, very good, very bad. And the thing is to remember and respect the bad times through the good times. And the good people who stand by you the good people who stand by you in the bad times are the people you should hang on to. And the bad people who come to you in the good times, they also have a right to do whatever they are like. Life goes on.
Yeah. But, so you talk about this thing, and one of the aspects of the book and all your this thing is about faith and fate. And essentially, you talk about that a lot. There is a certain level of faith, fate. And can you talk about faith in your own life?
Faith and fate.
Yes.
Okay, see, I'm a Stoic, and I believe, I'm a Pahari, I'm a Kumaoni, and the other day, I read this line on somebody's Facebook thing, and I made it my motto. And I don't know her, I've only read it, so it's not my original line, but I loved it, and now it's my line. And she said, "Main Pahari nahi, main pahad hu."
Oh, that's lovely.
I love that.
Yeah.
And really, main Pahari nahi, main pahad hu. And around the world, when I go to sessions, at the end of it, there'll be 1 or 2 tough, bright, tall, tough-looking women with beautiful smiles, and they'll come and say, "Main bhi pahadi hu." And whether it is Garhwal, Uttarakhand, anyway, they come up. I've had this in Rome, I've had this in Poland, I've had this somewhere. And they haven't come to me as a writer. They've come to me because I'm a Pahari. So that sense of kinship. If I tell you how many Paharis there are in Jaipur, it's astounding. And it's lovely. So that sense of place is very important to me. And the mountains give faith.
Yeah.
Because the mountains, it's something about the mountains. You go there, wahan astha hoti hai, what is called.
True. And you do talk about astha, and you do talk about faith. You also talk about, and I want to talk. Okay, so we've talked about mountains, so let's start about this. In the Himalayan arc, in your introduction, you quote somebody, and you say that for anybody who's lived in the mountain, you inherit the mountains.
Absolutely. And
Right.
you know, people who live by the sea, there's a different wisdom about the sea. It leaves, the tides, it comes back. That the tidal waves, the pattern of the sea enters your body,
Yeah,
in fact.
yeah.
And you know the wisdom of the sea is that it will retreat, it will return, it will retreat, it will return.
Yeah.
The wisdom of the mountains is different.
Yeah.
The wisdom of the mountains is it will stand strong unless kabhi catastrophe ho jaye, Joshimat ho jaye, but
Yeah.
it is, and there is something, anybody who goes and stays in the mountains from a while, they don't have to be from there. But that rock strength,
Yeah.
I found, comes to them.
So can you talk about really saying, when you read any of your books, Himalayan Love Story, for example, you do feel a sense of the mountains. I don't think anybody has written as, well, I think you write about the mountains with this great deal of love. It's almost tender. It's this love affair. It's this longing. It's beautiful. It exists on your pages. It's just gorgeous. Can you talk about growing up there?
I'm suffering from severe imposter syndrome because everybody says mountains, mountains. 4 years, I've just not been able to go to the mountains. I go for one day, something happens, I have to rush back. But this coming year, I'm going to start on a new project, which I've been waiting to do for a long time.
Which is?
Which will get me through the mountains again for the next 1 or 2 years. You know, I did the Bhutan Literature Festival for 10 years.
Yeah.
And Bhutan is a place where the incredible strength of the men and the women and the mountains is there. Nagaland, every rock there has a personality and an identity. Something, and you know, I love other mountains. I love Boulder. I love the Rockies.
Yeah.
I love these places. But there is a spirituality in the Himalayas which is very difficult to explain.
Yes.
And I have a novel, I have this anthology which will be launched tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's called Mystics and Skeptics, Himalayan Masters. And there are so many other people who have experienced the power of the Himalayan landscape. Maybe it's these centuries of prayer that have gone in there, these Devis, Devtas. It's something about the mountains. There is something. I don't know what it is, but I love it.
But you know, you talk about this faith, and you know, you talk about this aspect, this indescribable quality, this sort of, in some ways, you know, this about how faith sort of hangs there in a way, in the sense that you sort of feel the presence in some way. My words, not yours. But you know, in Mystics and Skeptics, you talk about, and I wanted to ask you, you say you have to have a certain level of skepticism, even in faith. And can you talk a little bit about that?
I can't talk about it. It's just that I'm not one for too many flowery words. I'm not one for... I'm naturally suspicious of anything that's over beautiful.
Yeah.
Or overdone, or over this thing. I like a little bit more rough love, tough love. I mean, I'm very suspicious of anything that looks too good. I don't know why, but not my style.
Okay. So, so, and we also talked about, you know, you've talked with writers, and you said, for example, Matangmai, she came to you, right? You imagined her. She was this word. This came to you. Do characters take on their own lives on the pages? Do you control them? Do they control you?
You know, the novel, my strangest novel ever, was called The Book of Shadows. I wrote it many years ago, and it's the one most people have forgotten about because it's a very difficult book. But it's told by a ghost. And that ghost almost possessed me. And it possessed my computer.
Really?
And once, I remember, the whole manuscript got wiped out. And I couldn't track it. And then I called a tech child in. It was many years ago when tech was not so easy. And a young man came in wearing a T-shirt which said 666, which is the beast. And he came in and he looked at my computer, he played with it, and he said, "Ma'am, if you don't mind, I'm going away. I've had a nervous breakdown, and if I look at your computer, I'll have a second nervous breakdown."
My God.
Because on its own, there was one line in the book which said, the ghost says in the book, when the ghost enters the story, he says, "I lurk in corners, I hide in shadows." Just those two lines from my whole manuscript kept coming on the screen. And he said, Bill Gates can't understand this. Steve Jobs can't understand this. Why are just these two lines coming on? It was weird. Then I have a friend who's a witch.
Oh, yes, of course, Ipshita.
Ipshita.
Yes.
So I told Ipshita, this is what is happening.
Yeah.
She said, keep a basil plant and some yellow roses near your thing. I did it because it scared the hell out of me.
And did it help, the basil plant?
Who remembers here? I'm not such that kind of person, but that was because it was in the voice of a ghost.
Yes.
So that's, strange, world is full of strange stories.
But do writers have this uncanny ability? Like, Amitav Ghosh talks about this. He said in The Flood of Fire, he says he started writing and he wrote and then those things happened.
That happens to me all the time. I write something and similar, I won't even bore the audience with what particular things have happened, but there were some very tragic things. In the Book of Shadows, I wrote a chapter about somebody being burnt alive by accident. Once I finished it, somebody very close to me actually got burnt. And writers are so cruel. Any of you who are close to writers, they are horrible people. This beloved person who I cared deeply for, I was also looking at the body to see what the burns look like. In my novel, how I'd written them. And I got afraid after a while because I would write things and they would happen. Then I was told by somebody that writers inhabit a space of prescience. That means they don't live just here. A bit lives in the past, but the mental radar is little in the past, little in the future, little in fantasy, little bit in jhoot jhaat also, I guess. But that's why writers often say that they pick up the stories. They feel the stories are being enacted in front of them. There is some other dimension from where these stories come to some writers. And if you're fortunate, you get them.
And you certainly are that. You see, yours seem to be, you do have that sort of certain, I don't know, there's a certain...
At the moment, I don't know if I'll ever write a book again. I'm all dried out. I wrote so much in the last 3-4 years.
Listen, I don't think that's possible. I don't think you can never write a book again. Then Manasi is saying, no, this can never happen, and I agree.
But it happened to me earlier. I did the Mahabharata for young readers, and rashly, David R. said, will you give it to me in 6 months? I said, Took me about a year. But to compress the Mahabharata, I had to for young readers, I had to read it again and again, different versions. And the Mahabharata is such an astounding work. And they really say whatever's there in the world is there in it. And after working on the Mahabharata for 1 year, I said, I can never write again because all the stories have already been told. There are no stories left. Every story in the world is there in the Mahabharata. And for 2 years, I didn't write at all.
But you've said that you won't write, you said you won't do a novel right now, but that doesn't mean you're going to not stop writing. Can you stop writing? Do you think it's like a tap you just switch off?
Maybe there's a time when all the stories are told within you. And many writers, as they grow older, they go on writing. You've told the stories. It might be better just to leave I've written 21 books. I have 2 more that I'm committed to writing. It would be lovely to read wonderful books and to have the quality of my books deteriorate as my mind deteriorates, as I get a bit slower or a bit lazier. बहुत तारीफ भी हो जाए तो you get. So I'm very I don't. It's not the main thing in my life anymore to write.
But if you look at Monet, for example, he did. If you look at the water lilies, and you find that he's done the water lilies over and over again. I went and saw. I'm in Philadelphia, and I was awestruck, and I said, "This is it." And then I went to Paris, and I found the same thing. And he reinvents the same thing. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm not suggesting anything, but the world has lots of water lilies. Do you think in some ways writers owe themselves to continue to do this? And for someone who has sort of the idea of it's also commitment to memory about keeping alive.
Each of my books has been so different from the others.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say I've had a good journey. I'm not tempted to write much more. I don't care somebody likes my books, doesn't like my books, anything. I'm very tempted to help other people write their books. The stories must be told. So I'm there for other writers. I'm there for a community of writers. I'm there to help the Lit Fest showcase more and more writers. But with my own stories, it sounds cruel and horrible. I'm bored. That's it.
I don't think, but I mean, well, I'm hoping that that's not going to happen, and I'm hoping at some point of time this immense reserve of strength is finally going to come, and you're going to find some other things to say.
May or may not, who can tell? You know, we've got 13 minutes left.
It's about faith and fate.
I don't know. Kushwan Singh, who's a dear friend of mine, and he once blurbed my books, and he said, Namita Gokhale writes about love, lust, and death. But I don't know what I write about, and as I said, ho gaya, words, 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 words.
Okay, so let me ask you, you talk about wisdom, and you said that in a lot of the books that most of your books, there is this aspect of ordinary wisdom, stuff that we've passed down, stuff that we already hear, our, resilience in some ways that your grandmothers talked about, or this thing like that, which sort of tells you to, get on with life, as you said, dust off. And I wanted to ask you to narrate the story of Sister Aquinas.
Oh, no.
No?
I just, what she's asking about, it's a long story and I won't get into it, but I got thrown out of college by a nun.
I want you to talk about, after that, I want you to talk about the fact that you go back and attend her leaving.
Okay, so this story, okay, which of you in the audience want to go on to questions? And then you got to get home. And which of you want to hear a story about Sister Aquinas? Okay. Sister Aquinas, Namita Gokhale is 17 years old and she thinks she knows everything about the world. And there's a nun there in St. Jesus Mary College, and she likes me very much in a way that might be suspicious today.
Yes.
And she calls me to her room. She says, why don't you drink some Santorini? And we chat, and she's very nice. Then I meet somebody who I fall in love with, and she says, Namita, why don't you... And I'm the model girl in the college, in the sense, first runner-up Miss JMC, or vice president of the college something. And I mean...
Essentially the bright future type.
Teacher's pet.
Yeah.
And she says, why have you stopped coming to college? No, I'm not very good at telling lies. So I said, because I've fallen in love. She said, oh, bring the young man to see me. I said, acha. So young man and I went to see her in the parlor where the nuns lived.
Yes.
And the class 3 employees were having a strike.
Okay.
When we went in, the conversation became about the class 3 employees. And she because my husband asked her. And she took an instant hatred to him. And they began saying, don't get married, he's after your money. I said, but I don't have any money. No, your grandmother's jewelry.
My God.
I said, and this is true, I said, my grandmother has gambled her jewelry away because my grandmother loved to play cards. And every now and then, ek churi kho jati thi. So, aisi family thi, sochiye. So then, after that, when I got married finally to a very nice man from a very respectable family, and who I love, my husband died young, but my marital family is my family still. I'm very close to them all, closer than perhaps my own family. They read a mass for me in church.
You said so. Yeah.
And they said, she is succumbing to lust. Pata nahi kya, to meri life mein every year or two something weird happens. And it doesn't upset me because I know my life has a tendency to do these weird things. So I just carry on normally and wait for it to subside. I don't react to it too much. But somehow I get people, I don't know what it is. I've had funny experiences and I am trying to sit down and write my memoirs.
See there?
Because that's one of the 2 books I'm hoping to work on. They know this, but it's because my life has been very odd.
No,
as they say, truth is stranger than fiction, always.
But okay, so let me, she's not telling you the other bit of the story. So essentially after this, she files a court case and she tries to get to do these...
we went to court.
Yes.
My sister-in-law was a lawyer. And my father-in-law was the law minister. Arun Jaitley was our lawyer. We went to court. 100 girls, she held back 100 girls from college. I don't have a college degree. I'm not a graduate. And after that, she stopped being a nun, but before that she went to Rome. And she said, I want to call you over because I want to tell the whole college, you were my favorite student And that's why I stopped you from giving the exam. Because the nun stopped me from giving my exam because I lost the story. Yeah. I wanted to study modern Indian literature. There was a course on it instead of a course on Chaucer. And I said, why should I study Chaucer? Yeah. So I studied Mohan Rakesh and contemporary literature. She held me back. And then she said, because I loved her, I held her back. Yeah. So then I gave her a book. And I wrote in that to Sister Aquinas, who taught me the real sense of the world. Because I realized world is crazy. Then only I realized. And I'm not a graduate, it doesn't matter. And anybody who's listening, I'm still waiting for that honorary degree.
Perfect, and then hopefully it'll come.
It'll come. But
so,
बहुत hint मारती हूँ universities
yeah, but don't worry, there will be. JMC is listening.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Dr. Namita Gokhale.
Yes, Dr. Namita Gokhale. So at this time, I'm going to open up this thing for the audience. Right in front. And all the young boys are asking, so we'll
loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Hi, my name is Priyansh, and any last advice for young writers?
Huh? Any last advice for young writers? Last advice for young writers? Be patient. Be very patient. And remember that for writers, many new media have opened up. If you write for audio, if you write for films, it's just a slightly different sensibility. Books have opened their barriers. And because they've opened their barriers, it's much easier to write a successful novel. Be patient, be true to your craft, but be open to all these new opportunities. That's my advice. There's
a gentleman at the back. There, on the right-hand side.
Hi, Namita ma'am. I fall in love with you every time I hear you talk.
Wow.
This is the 6th year and I'm telling you, you're becoming more gorgeous than ever.
Oh, wow.
I'm honestly telling you this. This is all I had to say, but wonderful.
What's your name?
Binodan, and I have been here almost every time I come, I say hello to you. You forget my face.
I'm so sorry.
This time you shouldn't.
Because
I've professed my love in front of the public.
Okay, yes. But I'll tell you a story to beat yours.
Please do.
2011 or 12, I invited Chetan Bhagat to come and speak in Jaipur in the Darbar Hall. And people got angry with me. They said, why are you calling him? I said, he's a popular writer. He's such a popular writer. I'm not a snob about it. They said, who'll be in conversation? I said, okay, I'll be in conversation. So there was me and Jay Arjun Singh in conversation with him. And at the end of that conversation, I said, but I'm old enough to be your mother. He said, no, you're a hot auntie. So I felt very happy. Hot auntie. Uske baad, horrible things happened.
This was before the allegations, right?
This was before I colored my hair, when my hair was still a different color. And then after this hot auntie conversation, he was so madly popular those days, which is a lesson to everybody that writers' popularity goes up and down, writers' worth remains constant. And when I walked out of the Darbar Hall, the capacity of that hall is not that much, but at least 150. People ran over me. I fell down on the ground. They trampled over me because they were running after him. It was so. Your compliment is well taken, and I doubt if anybody in this audience will run over me today. Yes. But that's what happened with Chetan Bhagat. And I remember that moment when I fell. These young people are running. That's fandom, and it's wonderful that books and writers have that fandom. And thank you, Vinodan. I'll give you my card, and deeply grateful for.
I'll fondly look to your memoir. I think so will so many people out here.
That's wonderful. That's a really lovely story.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
That wasn't a question.
No, that wasn't a question, but that was a declaration of love, better than a question.
Yeah, that was. Okay, that's so I think we're out of questions. We have 4 minutes to go. So you can ask me a last question.
I am going to ask
or if Manasi wants to ask me a last question, you can come up on stage and ask a question.
Manasi, ensure that you get...
Manasi is now the editor-in-chief of Penguin Random House. Big clap for her. And one of the kindest and most encouraging editors anywhere in the world. So actually, you can ask her a question, because all of you who've got books inside you, you want to ask the mic and ask? Yeah.
Namita, the question I have for you is what gives you hope?
She's asked me, what gives me hope? I don't know the question all of you might ask yourself, and I'd love one of you to tell me what gives you hope. But to me, I'll tell you what gives me hope. And whenever I reach, when they say when you get to the bottom and you get back to the top of the slide, whenever I'm in the deepest heart of despair, which hits us all, when you think you've reached rock bottom, then you sit there for a while, then the human spirit is such that something in the biology of staying alive, it'll kick you into getting hope again. And that hope could come in the most unexpected ways. It could come by drinking a hot chocolate. It could come by listening to a very bad joke. It would come that you look out the window and the road outside, a young couple are laughing and holding hands. You never know what. But it's something that reminds you that, yeah, the world will go on. That's what.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
2 minutes
and
41 seconds.
So you said what gives you hope. Do you ever, life has kicked you down, but do you look at all of these people, we talk about reading, we talk about various things, and each year you hear that people are not reading enough. What gives you hope in terms of that?
One thing I hate about this reading thing is this making a fetish out of reading.
Yeah.
Always, you'll never find everybody reading. Very special people read.
Yeah.
Very few people read. And that's been the story from the beginning of time. Because a book, a piece of literature is something that is distilled. Those people who want to hear other people's stories in a simple way, they gossip.
Yes.
They gossip around the village well, they gossip in the fields, they gossip about their neighbors. That also is a very good function in society. But reading a good book is a discipline. It's not always fun. Just like writing is a discipline and not always fun. And those who want to read books should be left alone. Those who don't want to read books should be left alone. This pressure to read books, I'm reading 30 books this year. No, we know you're only reading the blurbs. Don't fool us.
Yeah.
Those people who read books, just read them and get on with it. But there's a new class of people who made it feel as though it's our sacred duty to read.
Yeah.
Sorry, publishers will push that because these publishers want to push you to read. It's become like you must use lipstick or use vanishing cream or night cream. It's become like that.
It's like a reading challenge.
When you want to read, read. You don't want to read, don't read. I don't like this pressure to read, especially for young children. The parents who push their children to read are teaching them to hate books. Just leave the books lying around. If they read them, they'll discover the joy themselves. That's what I feel.
That sounds the same.
So we have about 40 seconds left. So if you don't mind, since you've talked extensively about your memoir, I'd love for you to share with everyone the title of the memoir, which I'm so excited about. Shall I do it? Okay, the memoir will be out very soon, I hope. I'm trying to get her to finish writing it. And it's going to be called The Unreliable Narrator.
Oh, how lovely. That's
a big clap. Can't wait to read it.
We are all unreliable narrators, but mine will be because I'll use that mask of fiction.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. That will be my last book.
Well, you never know. As you said, never lose hope.
But if I could say something to the audience here, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being at the Jaipur Literature Festival, for believing in books. And this clap is for all of you, and for this festival, and for books. All of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It means something to all of us. And let's keep the hope alive with the Jaipur Literature Festival and all the other literature festivals all across India. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see you all tomorrow.
We would like to thank Namita Gokhale and Mandira Nayar for this wonderful and interesting conversation. We thank Dainik Bhaskar for their support. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Hope you all had a lovely time.